Hello there, AP Environmental Science class. All right, welcome to part one of my lecture on Chapter 18, Solid and Hazardous Waste. There are about 68 slides to this lecture, but I am going to try to do it in two parts, not three parts here. A lot of the slides only have one or two sentences on them, so I think I'll be able to do this again in two parts, even though the parts may be a little bit longer than what you're used to, because again, there are 68 total slides that we need to go through. So once again, Chapter 18, Solid and Hazardous Waste. This is part one. So here we go. All right. So core case study, we're talking about cradle-to-cradle design. So what does that mean? Well, the traditional product life cycle, this would be the life cycle of any product, is the beginning, which we call the cradle, through disposal, which we call the grave. So normally we've had this cradle-to-grave type of traditional product life cycle. Well, now as we head through the 21st century here, we need to have a new approach, and that new approach is the cradle-to-cradle design. And what's that meaning? Well, that means reusing parts over and over again in other products, or thinking of solid waste and pollution as potentially valuable materials and chemicals. So the idea here is to not create a product and then just put it in the garbage. The idea here is to create a product and then use that product over and over again in different industries to make different products, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about in this chapter. So you'll notice here, this is the cradle-to-cradle design. And again, manufacturing, the aim is to make all products reusable. So again, you'll look at the biological cycle, right? We talked about Mother Nature. Mother Nature really doesn't have any waste, right? So here we can start anywhere we want. Plants, right, are eaten by animals. A higher animal up the food chain, right, will eat that animal. Then those animals basically die, and then we have decomposers that decompose the waste, that then go into nutrients, that then go into growing the plants, and the whole cycle continues. So we want that with technical cycle as well, right? So basically you have something, the technical nutrients, right, would be the pieces that put together a chair, right, or to put together a computer, right? So we have these nutrients that go into then a manufacturing plant that then creates the product, that then we use the product, that then instead of throwing it out, we need to return it, right? Take it apart, return it, and then somehow use it again to create another product. So that's the idea of this cradle-to-cradle design, and it's where we really need to start heading now, because as we're going to see as we go through this chapter, we are producing too much waste, and the earth can't handle all the waste that we are producing. So what environmental problems are related to solid and hazardous waste? Well, solid waste contributes to pollution and includes valuable resources that could be reused and recycled. Hazardous waste contributes to pollution, natural capital degradation, health problems, and premature death. And again, we spoke about hazardous materials in a previous chapter where we talked about all that hazardous waste. So first, we're going to talk about solid waste, and it is piling up. Again, in the natural world, there is virtually no waste, right? Just showed you that diagram, how that kind of talked about in nature, how there is no waste. Everything is used. When an animal dies, the decomposers decompose that animal. Its nutrients are then used to grow plants that other animals eat, that then eat those other animals, et cetera, et cetera. There's no real waste in the natural world. Well, unfortunately, us human beings, right, we're changing the natural world, and so we are dealing with a lot of waste. So what do we talk about when we're talking about solid waste? Basically two types. We're talking about industrial solid waste, which could come from mines, farms, and industries, and we're talking about municipal solid waste, MSW. Okay, do understand that acronym. That's municipal solid waste, and that's our garbage or our trash that you and I actually throw out on a daily basis. Unfortunately, much of the waste ends up in rivers, lakes, oceans, and natural landscapes. Again, we spoke about that in a previous chapter. Single-use plastic bags, for instance, right? And you know there's been a push, especially in some of the counties here around New York City, to do away with these plastic bags for grocery shopping, for instance. 100 billion are used in the U.S. each year. They take up to 1 1,000 years to completely break down. And in fact, some of them never disintegrate completely. They end up blocking drains and sewage systems and kill wildlife. And again, the discarded plastic threatens wildlife. So this is just one example of the solid waste that we are piling up, again, these plastic bags, and why, again, there has been the push in many of the counties around New York here. I know Westchester, Rockland counties have had pushes in the past to get rid of these single-use plastic bags. And again, I'll be honest with you, I bought my own shopping bags to use at the grocery store. I never use plastic bags anymore. Not only are they better for the environment, but between you and me, I can fit more stuff in the bags that I actually bought for like $1, those reusable bags. So I actually have less trips that I need to take from my car up into my kitchen with my food. So to me, it's a win-win. The plastic bags are terrible for the environment, and you don't fit that much stuff in them, right? So buy these reusable bags. To me, they're more useful, and they're better for the environment as well. All right, so where does our municipal solid waste end up? Well, most of it gets buried in landfills or burned in incinerators. That will happen in more developed countries. And unfortunately, we have open dumps in less developed countries, which leads to their own problems, which we'll talk about as we go through the rest of this lecture. All right, so court case study here talking about solid waste specifically here in the United States. The United States is the world's largest producer of solid waste and highest in solid waste per person. Industrial waste represents 98.5% of all solid waste here in the U.S., mining, agricultural, and industry. And again, most of these waste break down very slowly. Lead, mercury, glass, styrofoam, plastic bottles actually do not break down completely, so then they are left in any area landfills. So you'll notice on the left-hand side here this is basically our integrated pest management. That's not true. What are we looking at here? We are looking at the composition of U.S. municipal solid waste, to where that U.S. municipal solid waste goes after collection, all right? So this is just a basic chart here. So you'll notice on the left, paper, 27% of our municipal solid waste. Again, what is municipal solid waste? That stuff you and I, right? Municipalities, what towns are kind of creating. We're not talking about industry here. So most of it is paper, most of it is food waste, yard trimmings, plastics, metals. You'll notice some rubber and leather, some wood, some glass, etc. Where does it go? Most in the U.S. here is 53% are going into sanitary landfills, 34% are being recycled, and we need to increase that number, and 13% is being incinerated. That means burned, but we'll talk about as we go through the chapter, again, burning your garbage. While it may get rid of the garbage, you probably can imagine the pollution you're potentially adding to the air with that. So not necessarily the best way to go. Again, recycling is the best way to go. So I would definitely understand this chart, understand at least what the highest composition of U.S. municipal solid waste is. Again, paper, food, kind of your main ones here. And then again, understand where it's going after it is collected. All right, so hazardous waste, obviously a serious and growing problem. So talking about hazardous waste, that's waste that is toxic, right? That can threaten human health or the environment. Anything that is toxic or corrosive or flammable can undergo violent or explosive chemical reactions or can cause disease. We do have some classes of hazardous waste: organic compounds, toxic heavy metals, and radioactive waste are our classes of hazardous waste. So here are just some harmful chemicals that are found in your home. And what I want to point out here is that the U.S. government has actually exempt many of these chemicals from government regulation. So unfortunately, that means you and I, for instance, batteries, right? We just can throw our batteries right in the garbage when they're done, because the government doesn't regulate them, even though we probably shouldn't be doing that. So what harmful chemicals are in your home? For cleaning, disinfectant, right? Drain, toilet, spot removers, septic tank cleaners, any paint products, all right? General, like batteries and glues and cements, pesticide, weed killers, ant, rodent killers are hazardous. Gasoline, motor oil, antifreeze, all right? Any of that stuff is hazardous waste, and again, is in your home, and so the government doesn't regulate it. So, motor oil, you can kind of, to throw it out in the garbage, right? Really probably shouldn't be the place for it, but that's where it ends up. So again, it is a serious and growing problem, this hazardous waste. And again, just understand some of the hazardous waste that you can find right in your home that again is unregulated. What about e-waste, an exploding hazardous waste problem? What do we talk about when we're talking about e-waste? That is electronic waste. So electronic waste is the fastest growing solid waste problem in the United States and around the world, and it's driven by increasing sales and short life cycles. For instance, every year and a half, it seems like my kids and my wife need a new iPhone, right? So what happens to that old iPhone, right? It should be recycled. Unfortunately, what's happening is that a lot of it isn't. It's just being thrown into these landfills. Well, the problem with e-landfills, especially in poorer countries, is then you have people, because they're poor and they need money, start digging through these landfills trying to get the bits of little pieces of electronics that maybe then they could sell, right? But unfortunately now you're dealing with people walking through garbage dumps, picking up e-waste, which could be hazardous and toxic, some of the waste. And so it really is a huge problem. Who are the leading producers of electronic waste? The United States and China. Now, recycling has increased to 30% by 2010, so that's good. But again, we need to increase that recycle rate of these electronic waste. Also shipped to other countries for processing. And again, workers, children usually in these other underdeveloped countries then get exposed to toxic heavy metals and or chemicals that may be part of this electronic waste. So it is a huge issue. But what's interesting is that this electronic waste contains valuable materials that could be recycled or reused, right? These people aren't going to be digging through the waste if the waste isn't valuable. So it is valuable. So we should, instead of getting into a point where children are digging through toxic heavy metals and chemicals to get some e-waste, we should just recycle and reuse the material. That would bring the cost down for everyone involved, and we wouldn't have to deal with these environmental problems. So what do we need to do to deal with this solid waste? All right, so we need a sustainable approach, right? That's what this course is about, sustainability. How do we sustain ourselves for the next 100, 200, 300 years? So what do we need to do? We need to produce less solid waste. Obviously, that's number one. We need to then learn how to reuse or recycle our solid waste. And for stuff that is not usable, we have to understand how to safely dispose of it so that not only is it safe for humans, but safe for the environment as well. So waste management, that's what we're talking about. So first, produce less, then reuse or recycle. Finally, safely dispose what is left. Okay, we just spoke about that. So what is waste management? Waste management focuses on controlling waste in order to limit their environmental harm, but does not attempt to reduce the amount of waste. Okay, so that's management. Management is managing what we have. So we're not trying to reduce it, but we're trying to control it in order to eliminate the harm. What we really need to do is waste reduction, which is reducing the solid waste, right, by reusing and recycling. That's the idea, reducing less solid waste and reusing and recycling. So integrated waste management is the changes basically takes both, right? Takes waste management and waste reduction and combines them into various strategies where we can do both, where we can A, manage the waste that we have already, and two, try to reduce the waste so that we don't have to manage as much down the road. So that's called integrated waste management. That's what we're looking at here. So again, for instance, raw materials come in, right? Processing and manufacturing creates a product. Solid and hazardous waste generated during the manufacturing, all right, maybe can be put in a landfill or some kind of management here, all right. The other waste generated by households and businesses, right, some plastic, glass, metal, right, paper, go back to the manufacturing for recycling and reusing. The food yard waste can be composted into fertilizer. Okay, so again, it's integrated. It's not only dealing with it, but also trying to limit it by reusing or recycling. All right, so again, understand what integrated waste management is. It's not only managing what we have, but also trying to reduce for the future so that we don't have as much waste. So how are we going to do that? There are 4 R's of waste reduction: refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle. I would definitely put the 4 R's to memory. right? So what is refuse? Just don't use it. I don't want to use that. Reduce it, use less of it. Reuse, use it over and over. And recycle, convert used resources into useful items and byproducts made from recycled material. And again, composting is a way of recycling as well, because you use bacteria to decompose biodegradable waste, all right? So either way can recycle. Again, reuse would be like a water bottle, right? Instead of buying a case of plastic, 30 plastic water bottles that you drink one and throw it out, you carry your own water bottle, right? And you just reuse it over and over again. You're not recycling this, you're just reusing it over and over again. All right, so that's what you want, the 4 R's: refuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle. So 6 strategies that also we can throw in there to try to help in our waste reduction. Change industrial processes to eliminate or reduce the use of harmful chemicals. Redesign manufacturing processes to use less material and less energy. Develop easy to recycle products. Establish that cradle to cradle responsibility. Again, we don't want to put it to grave. We don't want to bury it. We want to use the products over and over again. Eliminate unnecessary packaging and use fee per bag waste collection systems. That means if you are going to have waste, we're going to charge you for it depending on how big that bag of waste is. So here we look at the left is what we should be doing. These are advices from the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. But on the right is what we actually do. So you'll notice we should reduce, we should reuse, we should recycle and compost. Then at the final, right, the last step, we should incinerate. And finally, the final step, if all else fails, we should bury. So we should reduce first, reuse second, recycle, compost third, incinerate fourth, and only again, if all else fails, do you bury it. Unfortunately, we kind of do it the opposite, right? We're burying 67% of our waste. Okay, we are recycling and composting 23.7%, so that's good, but you'll notice we incinerate 9%, we only reuse 0.2%, and we're only reducing our use by under 0.1%. So obviously, we need to kind of flip the right triangle almost on its end, right? Flip it, and that's what we need to be doing. So understand, left is what we should do, right is what we're actually doing, and as you can tell, we're really not doing what we should be doing when it comes to reducing waste. So, why are refusing, reducing, reusing, and recycling waste so important? Well, what are the benefits? The benefits are a decreased consumption of matter and energy resources, right? Because it kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about in this class. If you refuse, reduce, reuse, or recycle, you don't need to make as much stuff, right? So not only do you decrease the consumption of matter needed to make the products, but the energy resources that you need to make those products, you're reducing as well. So this is a win-win for everybody involved. It reduces pollution and natural capital degradation, another win-win, and it saves money, right? So at the end, that's the game, right? The game is about money. And so if you can do the 4 R's, you're actually going to save money. And again, that's what's key here. And to me, that's what's going to make this take off, right? The money saving. When you show people you can save money, people usually do it. So hopefully that's where we can head as we head through this 21st century. So what are some alternatives to the throwaway economy that we're kind of in right now? What does that mean, throwaway economy? That means cradle to grave, right? That's what we're doing. We want the cradle to cradle. So what are some alternatives? Today's industrialized societies has substituted throwaway items for reusable ones, right? For instance, a water bottle is a great example of a reusable item. The questions to ask to reduce consumption. These are the questions you need to ask yourself. Do I really need this product? How many of these products do I really need, right? So going back to the water bottle example, my daughter has 12 water bottles. 12. Why? I have no idea. Every time she goes out, she buys another water bottle. Maybe we don't need that many water bottles, right? Do we need many of those, right? Just got to need one. I don't know, but that's an example of how many do I really need. Is this something I can use more than once, right? And can I repurpose this product when I am done with it? If you can't, you may not want it. If you can, well, that's a reuse. So definitely purchase it, right? So these are some alternatives. So again, what can you do? Follow the 4 R's of resource use, which is when it comes to reducing solid waste. Ask yourself whether you really need it. Rent or what you're buying, and refuse packaging, all right, as well. Rent, borrow, or barter goods when you can. Buy secondhand. donate or sell unused items. Buy things that are reusable, recyclable, or compostable. Buy products with little or no packaging. Avoid disposables such as paper, plastic bags, plates, cups. That's another thing. I stopped using disposable plates in my house, right? I used to go through paper plates because it's a lot easier than washing dishes. Well, at the end of the day, though, it's not good for the environment, right? Paper was one of the highest waste that we have as a municipal solid waste. So I personally stopped using paper plates, paper cups, the plastic utensils, and we just, I got a dishwasher, so I use the dishwasher. Cook with whole, fresh foods. Avoid heavily packaged processed foods. That's even better for your health. And discontinue junk mail as much as possible. Read online those newspapers and magazines. So you know the routine here with these charts. Just understand a couple of things just in case you need to pull that out for an FRQ. All right, so let's revisit that cradle-to-cradle design we talked about. Again, reuse is on the rise. So the European Union has banned e-waste, that's that electronic waste, from landfills and incinerators. So that means in Europe, you have to reuse your electronic waste. It can't go into landfills and it can't be burned. So manufacturers are required to take back products at the end of their useful lives. Finland has actually banned all beverage containers that cannot be reused. Rechargeable batteries is a great idea, right? Believe it or not, I used rechargeable batteries more when I was a teenager than I do now. I don't know why, but yeah, why get rechargeable batteries, right? They may be a little bit more expensive up front, but then you can use them over and over again and you're not throwing batteries out. And again, those reusable cloth bags for groceries that I spoke about a little bit earlier, again, let's tax those plastic shopping bags, or in many spots, not even allow them to be distributed. All right, these are things that can help because again, reuse is on the rise. Again, many cities have banned plastic bags and polystyrene foam food containers. Shared use, so a neighborhood tool library, right, where everyone can go and get tools from. Instead of buying tools, maybe in your neighborhood, you can have one spot where everyone in the neighborhood kind of shares tools. I'm not sure if that is feasible in today's society, but it's definitely an idea. Same thing for toy libraries, right? Instead of buying all these toys, go and rent the toys you want your kids to play with for a little bit. If you know kids, you may not yet, but when you do get your own, if you decide to go that way, you'll know that kids play for stuff for about a week and then they never play with it again. So maybe toy libraries are the way to go. You rent the toy, you borrow the toy you want, your son or daughter plays with it for a week and then they're done, and then you return it instead of having all these toys lying around. And companies, again, rent tools and household goods instead of buying them outright. We can share. So how can you reuse? Buy beverages in refillable glass containers, use reusable lunch containers and coffee containers, store refrigerated food, again, in reusable containers, use those rechargeable batteries. When eating out, bring your own reusable container for leftovers. Again, it's Westchester County. Maybe we can't do that, but maybe we should, right? Carry groceries and other items in reusable basket or cloth bags like I do. Buy used furniture, cars, and other items whenever possible. I don't know about the furniture, but I haven't bought a new car myself in years. I buy them used because not only do you get them at about half price, but you can only get them a couple of years old. So again, things that you can do to help reuse, and that can obviously decrease the amount of solid waste. All right, let's talk a little bit more about recycling. All right, one of the 4 R's. What is recycling? Well, there are a couple of different types. The first one is called primary or closed loop recycling, and that's when materials are recycled into the same type. So for instance, you put that paper, right, in the bins here at Ardsley High School. The paper gets recycled, it gets recycled and creates more paper, all right? So that would be a primary or a closed loop recycling. A secondary recycling is when materials are converted into other products, right? So maybe I end up recycling this water bottle because maybe I see the green coming off. I don't like it, so I recycle it. So maybe they melt down this metal and maybe they use it to make the front of a wristwatch or something like that. Okay, that would be secondary recycling, or using materials that converted into other products. Types of waste that can be recycled: again, pre-consumer, internal waste generated in manufacturing processes, or post-consumer, the external waste generated by a product use, right? So those are the types of waste that can be recycled. Before we get it, internal waste at the manufacturing plant, and then after we get it as consumers, which is the external waste generated by the actual product that we actually have. Upcycling is when you recycle the form to something more useful than the original item, while downcycling is the opposite. Your recycled form is less useful than the original item. Necessary steps for recycling: got to collect the material, you got to convert it to new products, and then buying and selling of the products that then contain that recycled material. With incentives, the United States could recycle and compost 80% of its municipal solid waste if we did have incentives. In 2014, electronic waste contained more than 1/10 of all the gold mined that year. Think about that. In these electronic waste, there's gold. 1/10 of all the gold mined that in 2014 was actually contained in the electronic waste that was thrown away. Right? I mean, think about that for a second. We talk about how we don't have enough resources on this planet. You could have reused that e-waste and right? 1/10 of all gold you didn't have to pull out of the ground. Those electronic wastes are also a source of iron, copper, silver, and aluminum. You can wonder why little kids in underdeveloped countries are digging through these landfills looking for this electronic waste. It has gold. It has copper in it, right? We need to be reusing it to bring the price down for everybody. And obviously, composting mimics nature's recycling of nutrients. Composting is just throwing stuff outside, food, grass, leaves. I have a compost heap in my backyard where I put my leaves and my grass clippings. Some people put food there in it as well. And basically, nature, bacteria, degrades, works on it, disintegrates it, and turns it into nutrients. My composting hill in my backyard that I throw in the leaves and my grass clippings every year in May, I dig it up and I have fresh soil that then I use in my garden. That's the soil I use. Instead of going buying topsoil at Home Depot or Walmart, I use my own topsoil that I create by composting leaves and grass. And again, it's bacteria degrading or disintegrating that leaves and grass back into the nutrients, back into soil that then can be reused. So that's what it's all about. All right, just a couple of more slides left here. We can mix or separate household solid waste for recycling. So materials recovery facilities, known as MRFs, can encourage increased trash production. Mixed waste approach becoming less sustainable in many communities. So what happens is people throw trash in recycling bins. So that's what we're kind of doing. The source separation costs less to implement, and the pay-as-you-throw or a fee for a bag, garbage, a charge for garbage, but not recycling. So again, we can charge for garbage, but maybe we don't charge for that recycling. So basically what this is saying is that you don't want to throw all your waste, the mixed waste approach becoming less sustainable because we don't have the money for people to sit there and pick your waste out. So if you throw everything in together and then people have to sit on a line and pick out the plastic and the paper. No. So what are we doing? We're having recycling bins, right? And we have that here at the high school. There are 3 separate bins in every classroom, one for paper, one for regular garbage, and one for your cans and your plastics and things like that. And that's what we're doing. And that source separation costs much less than actually having a mixed waste approach. So we've been doing this, guys. We've been doing this for years. And the idea is to just ramp it up now, do more of this recycling if we possibly can. Again, paper, 55% of the world's industrial tree harvest is used to make paper. We could make tree-free paper from straw or knaf. We talked about that in a previous chapter, but we could also recycle the paper, right? So the pulp and paper industry, world's 5th largest consumer of energy, right? Water use and pollution. So to make this paper, we've talked about this, you need energy, you need water, the pollution occurs. So again, we need to recycle paper. Not only will it save trees, but it's going to save energy and decrease our pollution as well. Recycled paper compared with making paper from wood pulp generates 35% less water pollution and 74% less air pollution. That's creating paper through recycled paper and not from the process from that wood. Think about that, guys. I think we need to recycle paper, right, as much as possible. 35% less water pollution, 74% less air pollution with that recycled paper. Plastics, we need to recycle as well. Plastics are composed of resins created from oil and natural gas, right? Ring a bell? We don't have enough oil and natural gas, right? We don't, it's a big issue. Those are fossil fuels. That's where plastics are created. Currently, only 7% by weight, plastics that is recycled in the United States. Many types of plastic resins, difficult to separate. In 2014, we had our first recyclable thermoset plastic, which is good. It's a different type of plastic that can be recycled easier. But plastics are a real problem, right? So we have to refuse is really what we need to do with plastics, because they really have a hard time recycling them. And right now, only 7%. So we need to refuse plastic. But then if we are going to use it, we have to recycle it. We have to increase that 7% number when it comes to plastics. All right, so recycling has advantages and disadvantages. This will be the last two slides. So the advantages of recycling: net economic, increases your net economic. You can make money, health and environmental benefits. The disadvantages: it is a little costly, all right, initially, but at the end of the day, it actually will save you money. Single pickup system, which is good. Sorting recyclables by type, which is something that we do, which is good. And so again, here's your kind of chart here. Trade-offs for recycling: advantages: reduce energy and mineral use, air and water pollution, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, reduces solid waste. Disadvantages: can cost more than burying in areas that have ample landfill space, but a lot of areas are losing that, especially here in the New York City metro area. Reduces profits for landfill and incinerator owners and might be inconvenient for some, but obviously the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages when it comes to recycling. All right, so that concludes part one of my lecture on chapter 18, solid and hazardous waste. Make sure to check back for part two. And as always, thanks for listening.